Hello again, everybody, and welcome to another episode of Fun and Games Podcast. I'm Geoff Moonen.
And I am Matt A.K. Stormageddon.
And you're listening to episode 188. And this episode, Hold on, I'll start that again. And on this no, I gotta try that again. You know what? You try again, it's gonna be fine. And on this episode, we are going to be talking about the relationship between challenge, fun, and difficulty in design of games.
Yes, and there are tons of different conversations we could have here. This is tied to Geoff's recent playing a variety of 2D platformers. And so we want to focus on the difficulty versus frustration of level design and platforming. Most of the listeners of this show will know there is a huge difference between level design, puzzle design, boss design, encounter design. We could talk about all of it, but it would kind of balloon out and we wouldn't be able to dig in. And I think focusing on this specific part and making this a multi-part series looking at difficulty versus frustration could really allow us to really dig in. Because we've talked broadly about difficulty, gone after the Souls games before I started playing them, and still I have my issues with them. This will allow us to get a lot more granular, which is what I think the future of some of the topics for the show will be, is revisiting things we've talked about before, but really kind of honing in on a specific aspect of design, music, presentation, and whatever else, because that's how we can get to more nuanced and more intricate and interesting conversations.
Yeah, and this isn't to say we've run out of ideas, it's just to say that, and another thing.
Basically.
If you've ever played the NES Rampage, we're just rebuilding California a little bit. The idea of, yes, challenge and difficulty and fun. Matt and I have been very open about play games at what difficulty are fun for you. You don't need to show anything off. If you just want to see the end of the story, see the end of the story. The thing is, what is the source of a challenge in a level, and what are the obstacles, whether intentional or not, that get in the way of that, and what are the aspects of friction that come between you and what you want to be doing? I mean, there is the obvious thing of a platformer in particular ceases to have its luster and its fun if the controls aren't quite right, or if you are playing something with a much sloppier sort of control. I've been playing a little bit of N64 3D platformers recently, and the idea of how tight the controls are there is murky.
Yeah, I mean, I recently, for those following me in the social spaces, know that as of when we're recording, I recently finished a replay of Banjo-Kazooie, which I 100%ed, which I wasn't intending to do when I started, but then realized the difference between beating and 100% is like 4 jiggies and 30 notes or whatever. I was like, I'll just do it.
You're already there.
Basically. And with the help of guides, I was able to. And it's funny, too, because I'm from the other perspective of playing through Banjo-Kazooie with the Switch Nintendo 64 controller replica. It felt right. It felt comfortable. But I will admit, there are definitely jumps I missed or things that went wrong because the controls aren't quite tight enough. They are definitely better, I think, with the N64 controller than they are with a standard dual analog controller, because the button orientation and how you hold the controller makes a huge difference for the N64. And we talked about that in that episode. But where we run into issues in older games versus newer games, it wasn't just that it was harder to tweak those things to perfection, but we also didn't quite know how. It was all new. The reason I think a lot of single analog PlayStation and N64 games border that frustration versus just difficulty by design is because it was a new frontier. We didn't know how to design for that space, and we were all kind of learning together. Whereas now there's kind of a standard for 3D platformers, and if you miss them, it's more often considered bad design because the knowledge is available and you didn't access it or couldn't learn it or whatever. I'm sure it's more complicated than that. I'm kind of oversimplifying, but that kind of thing.
Yeah, there are helping tools that whoever did them first, they don't own them and now we use them. I also think of Crash Bandicoot as a 3D platforming series that the first game goes all over the place. They also did not have a sense of what is a sane challenge, I want to say. If you want to get the gems, you have to get all of the boxes, and you also aren't allowed to die while playing through the stage. Either one would be okay. Both are heinous. Whereas modern Crash titles in both the Insane trilogy and in Crash 4 It's About Time, they can go in a lot of different 3D motion directions because you have your shadow underneath you. So without it being a huge reticle or anything like that, you know where you're going to land, which is one of the big difficulties that certainly early 3D platforming design had. I didn't run into that as much in playing old Crash Bandicoot games. I often go back to, of the original trilogy, my favorite's actually Cortex Strikes Back. For nostalgic reasons, simplicity but improvement, etc., etc., I go back to it a lot. And maybe it's just because I am used to it, but I also feel as though when they give you perspective shifts, they are distinct. When they are side-scrolling, they are side-scrolling. When they are front to back, they are front to back, and they design the jumps and reaction time you're supposed to have with that accordingly. There are a few times where that goes a little off the rails, and you feel it. I'm blanking on the name of the level right now, but it's one of the ice levels, the snow levels, and there's a whole side-scrolling section that is, if you want to get every single crate, and it is a trial, and there's a lot of nitro, instant explosive crates, and you have to do a little bit of, it's mostly side-scrolling, but it gets just a little bit of that kind of Capcom beat-em-up side-scroller kind of 3D. That can be a huge problem. So having little anchors like that can be very useful. And I also think of that area because if I had to pick a spot in all of that game, which I love, where I'm like, yo, fuck this spot, but it's 4 jiggies and 30 notes, I need to get this gem, it would be that one.
Yeah, I mean, I think that era especially, there were certain things that were less difficulty and more frustration and more not necessarily by design, but because there was no better way to do it. I think of water levels in the 3D platformers of the time. Mario 64, Banjo-Kazooie, and so on. By far, my worst experience is I think it's Clanker's something. I can't remember the name of the stage. But half of the stage is underwater, more than half, and just maneuvering Banjo, because you have two modes of movement for Banjo and Kazooie underwater. The wingspan push, where you go further, but it's harder to control, or the little foot pedal as Banjo, where you move much slower, but you will have more precise movement. Which was also kind of a take on Mario's movement in Mario 64 underwater. Also, he had like big arm swings or little kicks. The problem is that you're controlling the camera in a mostly 360 degree, but not so much under you on land. But in water, it's full 360. And not only are you managing the camera in full 360, you are also managing Mario in that space. And it becomes much more frustrating, I would say, whereas on the other side of things, how design is tight, building difficulty, is basically any of the jump challenges in Mario 64. Mario's jumps are so precise in that game. They have such good forward momentum that you can almost always know if you do a run, duck, jump, how far you'll get, or a backflip, how far you'll go, and you can bet on those distances. In Banjo-Kazooie, it's a little more nebulous, like using one of Kazooie's powers to like jump higher. You can jump higher straight up, you can jump higher slightly moving forward, or you can move forward while jumping higher. The arc and range of that is so varied that a lot of those jumps are against a wall or in a hallway, so you don't go flying into the distance when you try and do them.
Yeah. I think the other thing with rare collectathons from the N64 that, for good or for ill, this is one of the issues that I find, is there's a lot more mid-challenge repositioning that I think goes on. Mario's jumps are fairly precise. And I think even the jumps and jump physics in Banjo-Kazooie, Banjo-Tooie, Donkey Kong 64, Conker's Bad Fur Day are fairly precise and fairly responsive. But many of the jumping challenges, platforming challenges in Mario 64 have kind of a momentum-based idea, where there is still momentum in Banjo-Kazooie, but because you have the alternate modes of locomotion and aerial movement, or Donkey Kong 64, you're swapping between characters that have very different platforming aspects. There's a little more, get to this spot, now get a little granular about where are you aiming, what's going on, you want this to land and go. This is where I run into a lot of frustration, and kind of my on-the-books distaste for Donkey Kong 64 is of the fact that the single-stick 3D movement on the N64, even moving Mario around on foot, there's a little bit of I just want him to turn around. No, he's got to do a little loop there. Got to get his zoomies out to kind of get in position. And if you're just doing that on a wide open space and setting yourself up, cool, great, grand, we can take our time. But if you are on jump number 3 of 5 and you've got like a precipice here, in just trying to get that little tweak, you set off an animation that takes up a little more area than you want and you fall off of it, I am enraged. If I just screwed up that jump, that's fine. I'll start again. I will try to get the 5 jumps in a row going great. But if it is because of I am playing by your rules and your rules take me outside of the parameters, this is a point of frustration that whether it is an N64 PS1 era platformer, a throwback that is being made now, or a 2D game or any kind of platformer, if you push a button, you expect it to have a certain range of a response. And when it takes you a little further beyond that and outside of your control, this is where frustration rapidly saps the fun out of it.
Speaking to precision and predictability, I'm taking back to one of the worst jumps probably in the history of video games, Simon Belmont's jump in the first Castlevania. It's a terrible jump, but it is also designed specifically.
Yes.
If you are moving forward, you will move forward far. If you are not moving forward, you will jump in place or you will jump to your death.
Yes.
You are an anchor and you will sink quickly. But the thing that makes that jump, I think, well designed and is less about frustration and more about just difficulty in knowing the platforming in that game, which admittedly it's not a platformer, it's more of a side-scrolling action game, is that because it's so specific, you know what you need to do. Can you always accomplish it? Maybe not. But it's not necessarily the control's fault because it is so specifically tuned. In the same way that like Mario's triple jump in Mario 64, if you need to use that for something and you have the space, it is the easiest thing to control.
Oh, yeah.
And it works every time. It's perfect. That's my favorite thing about certain platformers. When the jump is tuned in a way that it becomes predictable and you understand it, it's where difficulty in these games can be a lot of fun because then it's just you figuring out how to use it or even ape that system. I think of Mario Odyssey and all of the Cappy jumps that I never perfected. I love that game, did not complete it, but there are videos online of folks basically infinitely jumping using Cappy and jumping off of Cappy or how you throw it or whatever, and it's brilliant. I don't know that it was designed with that intent, but the fact that people were able to figure it out and use the game system almost against itself in a way, I think is also kind of brilliant to the design. They only are able to do that because Cappy has a set distance, a set speed. It never changes. There's no variety. And so you can basically predict and exploit that because of how well tuned it is.
I do think Nintendo, if they didn't intend for all of those Cappy jumps, they planned for all of those Cappy jumps. Because there are so many areas and spaces that, well, I made it all the way up here. Here's some coins. Just as a signifier of you haven't broken the game and you did a good job. I think that's beautiful and I love that. Yeah, having those set distances, those set pieces, you learn the rhythm and pace of the game. The Simon Belmont jump is a fantastic example. I've played some games that were made way after that people complained about the jumps, and then I played the game and went, this is a Castlevania 1 style jump, which means you need to think methodically. Your arc is going to be your arc. It's not as strong of a physics game like a Sonic the Hedgehog or Mario might be. They will throw different obstacles at you, so you must have patience. The game in particular I'm thinking of that has that is Prinny Can I Really Be the Hero from the PSP, where you have 1,000 lives, which are basically 1,000 Prinnies, the lost soul exploding penguin demon things from the Disgaea series. They do not have any aerial maneuvering. That's just as easily explained as, these are pathetic creatures. You think they have aerial maneuvering? Come on, dude. And spell the way they say it. So you work with that. Knowing that people were complaining about it at the beginning made it a much more fun experience for me. Because like, well, what's wrong with it? Oh, it feels like this. Let me start thinking about the game like this, and it opens up. Versus having it go every which way, and you need to be a lot more precise, and the controls need to match that. Cappy's throw does have a set distance, and there is a set amount of time versus input that allows you to maneuver within that. Having certain anchor points in these allow people to have some sanity and to develop techniques and skills like this. One of the reasons I really like challenging platformers is because, to me, it is like music. It's passages. It's learning the song. A good platformer level that is the same pattern or similar enough pattern every time that you kind of get the feeling of like, okay, I jump at this point and do these things. And it's a little bit of visual and a little bit of the honest feel of timing, of rhythm, of sound. You almost can close your eyes. Don't close your eyes. And I'm nowhere near that point, but there are challenges where okay, there are 5 jumps. There are 7 maneuvers in this within this single room. So like get this and then do that and you thread this needle and it feels very nice. But you do need those points of stability one way or another. You have to know what the game allows you. It's nice if, in those instances, the game doesn't laugh at you or punish you too hard when it doesn't go perfectly well. I know I don't learn music that well if somebody is constantly stamping their cane down telling me how I messed it up.
Yeah, and I think that's a good transition to like level design, because level design adds to that rhythm and that momentum. For me, some of my favorite platformers are momentum based. I obviously love the Sonic CD, especially the 2D games.
Oh, yeah.
But that said, I recently replayed Sonic CD, which is kind of an anomaly in the Sonic oeuvre, being developed by a different team at the same time as Sonic 2 for the Genesis. And it is closer to Sonic 1 design than it is Sonic 2's design. On top of that, the stages, for those who don't know, Sonic CD has this storyline where you're meant to travel through time, go to the past and destroy Robotnik's machines in the past to then fully defeat Robotnik. So the stages are larger, they are meant to be explored, but Sonic is still momentum-based gameplay, and on top of that, you need clearance or runway to time travel. It is very much like Back to the Future, and I'm sure inspired by, that you need a runway, you need space to hit 88 miles per hour.
And in the early stages, they do give you certain loops and spaces where you can generate the momentum in a small space, but you have to find them, and they're not in every stage.
Right, and as the game goes on, like Wacky Workbench is the most hated in the entire game. You have to go up and down using platforms, and the entire base level, bottom level of the stage is a springboard. So you can't run on it. And it's small, like vertical hallways. You have to climb up using platforms, climb down using platforms, and not hit the spring pad that will shoot you back up in a way that you don't want to go. This is not difficulty. This isn't a challenge. This is frustration. This is not a design that would be conducive to A, going fast as Sonic, which is the whole point of playing Sonic, but also going fast and platforming. The reason the first couple of levels work so well in Sonic CD is because they're vast, they're expansive, and you can get up to speed, you can jump while doing it, go to a higher path, a lower path. Like that ultimately is what makes for a good Sonic stage in both 2D and 3D. It's multiple paths, either left and right or up and down, depending on 3D versus 2D or whatever. And why this game ultimately becomes frustrating if you are trying to do the time travel mechanic especially, and that completion is it's not really designed for it. If you play the game straight up as a platformer and a more standard platformer where you're starting and stopping, it's fine. I can still get through it pretty easily. The bosses aren't that hard. But if you are playing the game as it's intended, as they designed it in theory for you to do, it becomes a frustrating mess. And it's because there's the short-sighted design ethos in that game of like, yeah, we want to make it challenging, but we're also going to go through the antithesis of what you've learned to love as Sonic. I think the reason Sonic 1 works better is because there are levels that are straight up platforming, but Sonic also in that is heavier and he doesn't control as light as he does in the later games. And there is more purpose to his platforming in that. In CD, you are meant to go super fast. The super peel out is meant to encourage that, even though it is the dumbest move in the history of Sonic because you have no protection. It's like the spin dash, but worse. Of course we want to use that. I think it's kind of the poster child, especially having replayed it, for like this discussion of when level design is incongruous to wanting to create a challenge for the type of game.
Yeah, and especially within the same title. As you said, Matt, the first few zones have that expansion of what was in the original Sonic. That idea of multiple lanes, cool, they go in every which way. And then even that idea of going to the past or going into the future is another expansion on those lanes and on those ideas. But there is always kind of a gutter ball track. And so Wacky Workbench, yeah, having played through it a few times, is absolutely a frustration point. Many Sonic games can have gimmick stages. We love Casino Night Zone and hate Casino Night Zone for a damned good reason. It is fun and weird, but it's just Casino Night Zone. They don't load it with enemies. You are fighting the stage more than you fought any other stage up until that point in Sonic. So they went for that. And it had a lot of nooks and crannies and payoff within it. Whereas in games like a Sonic game where there's high courses and low tracks, you want to get to that higher spot, and you can make an attempt after attempt after attempt. Hitting the super springy floor of Wacky Workbench feels like punishment, feels like mockery.
Yes.
Almost, no you didn't. Get bounced, idiot. You got to try again. And if you want to get back to the exact point where you started, you are further back than when you started because you now need to maneuver back to 1 whilst fighting these sorts of high-springing physics. That kind of thing is frustrating. There again, where does it allow you to try again, and how much difficulty does it give you? But also, this was a Sega CD title. This was during the 16-bit era where graphics were getting better. You could display cooler vistas. The sprites could be bigger, and plenty of games were still platformers. Whether they needed to be or not, it was the genre du jour, and so everything was a platformer, whether it was well-designed or not. This then leads into the thing of the design student's dream and the game designer's nightmare. I haven't played a ton of Earthworm Jim, but I do know from my experience and from watching it that it is cool, gorgeous, wacky, weird, and it is a pain in the ass to know what is a hazard and what isn't and where you're supposed to go. And that kind of signposting is necessary.
Yeah, I mean, as a super fan of the Earthworm Jim series, the cartoon, like all of it, the first 2 games in the series, which as far as I'm concerned are the only 2 games in the series, because we don't talk about Earthworm Jim 3D, talk about bad design, but the first 2 games, like the first level of Earthworm Jim 1 is pretty well laid out. You understand where you're going. You can kind of tell where everything is. But as that game goes on, and then it's even exacerbated and kind of mocking the player with in the second game, like there is some intentionality in the second game. There's a game where you are suddenly playing as a salamander instead of Jim, and it's a swimming stage, and you're like trying to navigate the space. Obviously, stages like that are designed to troll the player. But in the first game, there's a stage where you're in like an underwater level, and to get from one part of the sub to another, you have to get inside this little submersible that has like 2 little jets that you spin to move. And it is just so poorly designed. And this submersible, as it hits walls and other things, starts to crack. And if you hit too many things, it bursts and you die. And there's just a lot of that kind of stuff in Earthworm Jim 1 that's either poorly designed generally, or you can't tell what from what. I think of the stage where you're in hell when you take on Evil the Cat. It's one of my favorite stages in video games just because of the aesthetic and the music, and it's haunting. And then suddenly there's these weird sound effects and nonsense for levity, and then it goes back into that really horrifying classical music. And it's like really cool, but it's so hard to tell where the hazards are. Certain things spit out fire that you're not always sure where they are. It's clear that the focus for that game was let's make it look cool, not let's make it readable. And I think readability, when it comes to level design, is absolutely key. It's why I wanted to make sure we chatted about Psychonauts a little bit, because
Yes.
Psychonauts is a game that is aesthetics and story and writing first, and it's a Tim Schafer joint, so I'm not shocked. But the platforming and the level design suffered a little bit. Now, there are some stages in that game that are incredible and almost impeccable, like the Milkman Conspiracy, one of the best levels in video games.
Everything came together beautifully as far as intent and execution. Beautiful.
But then you have stages like the Meat Circus, a stage that I hate so much that I don't actually genuinely remember a lot of it because I've blocked it out traumatically, where it is almost impossible to get through because the readability of the tight ropes and everything else, and as you're supposed to get through it, is just so unclear. And it's a couple of things. I think it's how the levels are designed. Some are designed better than others, but I think it's also the controls. And I can say that because I've also played Psychonauts 2, which, as far as I'm concerned, is a perfect 3D platformer. Flawless. But it's only because they were able to learn from their own lessons, and the stuff that they brought back from the first game are more tuned. Raz's movements is more precise. Because Raz is so floaty in the first game, it does give you the ability to do some pretty incredible things, but it also means that the jumps don't have that consistency we talked about, like in Mario 64. You never are quite sure where he's going to land when he uses the sphere versus just jumping cleanly versus whatever else. The readability is not quite there, and it becomes a frustrating, challenging mess, not because it's a difficult game that you just have to learn the patterns, but because there are design things that didn't quite come to fruition before release.
And is actively fighting you in doing so. One could possibly argue the Meat Circus is about frustrations and terrors of childhood amalgamated together. Your frustration in dealing with the trapeze. You are sharing Raz's pain, trauma, anxieties, and insecurities. And that is just a really Watsonian explanation for a Doyleist problem. But you're absolutely right. And I think Psychonauts, given that it was an early Double Fine game, and it was kind of them striking out on things. They leaned into their strengths, which was the design, which was the writing, which was the concept. Oh my God, beautiful stuff. Much like kind of the everything needed to be a platformer of the 16-bit era that I alluded to, the pseudo-collectathon, pseudo-3D platformer that Psychonauts, the original, was kind of a victim of this is what you do, and this is what was at the time. Whether it was fresh or not, it was the most straightforward way to deliver some truly fantastic ideas and cool pieces of exploration that I think we're still picking apart and having fun with decades later. And I'm really glad that they had the opportunity, that Double Fine has had the opportunity to continue and persevere through a lot of cool design stuff, and that Psychonauts 2 was able to learn from all that so that we could enjoy this really cool property and world, because goddamn it, it's wacky and we all deserve it.
Yeah, totally. And I think also that's my favorite way to gauge when a game is challenging versus a game is poorly designed or frustrating. I think about Mario 64 to Mario Odyssey. A lot of people say that Mario Galaxy and Mario Sunshine are sequels to Mario 64. Well, I get that they are new 3D entries, and so in that lineage it makes sense.
Right.
I and others, and we talked about this in the N64 episode, Odyssey I feel like is the true successor to 64 because it basically controls the same, but it's just a little tighter and a little prettier. Well, a lot prettier, actually. And then the expansive worlds that you can go to, most of which are pretty well designed in Odyssey. Some are better than others, but for the most part, they're all hits. Also gives that comparison point. But I don't think a sequel is required to really understand that. There are some games that you play that within the moment you play it, you go, oh, this is challenging and well designed. I just suck. For me, the game that invokes that immediately is Celeste. Celeste is one of those games that within minutes of playing, I went, oh, this game is perfectly tuned, but I'm going to need to get better at it. I never, when I died in that game, ever got mad at the game. You know, we've all yelled this as a kid, I pressed the damn button. I pressed jump. Why didn't it work? I pressed it.
You were pressing it like a dozen times while you were falling down the pit, hoping that it realized that it made a mistake and that you were correct.
But those moments don't really happen in Celeste. I may have had one or two where I was like, oh, I thought I made that. But for the most part, it's tuned so specifically and the levels are designed so masterfully that you know you are playing a masterpiece of game design. It's why I have such high hopes for Love Eternal, because just a little bit we played of it felt like an exact same thing as far as tuned within an inch of its life. You just need to get good. I love games like that. I am often awful at them. And towards the end of Celeste, I did need to put on the unlimited jump mode or whatever else to get through it.
Yeah.
But that's not the game's fault. That was my lack of patience and me wanting to see the ending. It really is one of those things that you can read that really easily. I'm not a game designer, so I could not explain to you what Maddie did to make Celeste so perfect. But what I can say is that I can feel it from the moment, just in the same way that you play an older 2D platformer and go, oh no, this isn't well optimized. This is going to be a horrible time. It's inherent in those moments when the controls are so spot on and we have those comparison points. Also, Shovel Knight's another one where the combat and the controls are so precise that you know where he's going to land, you know how he's going to react, you know how to do the platforming, the things you have. It's why I fear for a Shovel Knight follow-up. Not because I don't think they can do it, but because they need to do it again and they have to improve it somehow.
Mm-hmm.
That almost feels like an impossible task, but those games where I think those things, I know, okay, they've really found it. They've really hit it here.
Right. A lot of that is readability. A lot of that is when you trust that you understand the systems of the game, that they will obey you as well as you can work within them as you understand it. If you're in a game where you jump like Simon Belmont, you trust that that's how that's going to be. You don't feel like some kind of flow state divine being, but you do feel potent within it. Games like Celeste, despite being punishing, despite being taxing, difficult, they do have a lot going on under the hood that is helpful, that is supportive, that is gentle even. If you want to have a good time, look up Coyote Time in game design, where games like Celeste, I don't think Celeste coined it, but it's based off of the idea of the old Roadrunner Wile E. Coyote cartoons where Wile E. Coyote could run off a cliff, and he won't start falling until he realizes he's off the cliff. A lot of these sort of more smooth platformers, these ones that require a lot more precision, give you a surprising amount of runway and leeway of being, in some cases, entirely off the platform. Your sprite does not touch it. This isn't old Mega Man where you can nudge it, and as long as you've got that one toe pixel, you balance on there. Which, you know what? Super Fighting Robot, he can do that.
We used to say Mega Man has toes of steel when we would play those games because that's how you would platform in that game. You had to do that sometimes.
Boots of iron, toes of steel. And honestly, knowing that you could do that meant you would give yourself a lot more allowance in not necessarily going like, okay, nudge it, now jump. You knew that you could go a little off of the platform before you hit jump. You weren't going to suddenly topple over necessarily. And if you did, you knew that it had an allowance and you went, I went too far. Let's try again. But Celeste and other games like it, you can go almost entirely off of it and jump will still work for you, regardless of where your sprite is there. Because things are going so quickly and you are stacking motions and movements, you don't think much of it. Even if you're not fully aware of it, you do get a subconscious and kind of vibes, feel-based go on it where you're like, I'm okay here. This is how much runway I have. Having that consistency of timing is crucial in having an enjoyable experience as it gets more difficult. It's why I think also, because Celeste is one of the games that put that feeling on the map for a lot of folks, certainly in indie spaces where a lot of these kinds of precision platformers are continuing. So many things are the Dark Souls of their genre, so many precision platformers. You got to be like, well, it's blank meets Celeste. It's not, but that's what everyone's going to think of, and it puts you in that right idea of, oh, it is flow-based, it is precision, it is platforming, it is difficult, but it is not cruel, which is a keen and key difference.
Yeah, for sure. I mean, it's what I loved most about my recent playthrough of Pepper Grinder. That is a game that's platforming, but you're not jumping. Not really. You jump occasionally, but for the most part, it's momentum-based, drilling through the ground to either shoot yourself up in the air or down towards something. It is fairly precise, but the fun in that game is that there are arcs, and you can't be super precise sometimes. That variety actually is a plus because depending on your arc, you might over or undershoot things, but gives you time to recover. And while I thought the boss battles were mostly the pits, I really liked the actual platforming, the meat of the game, the level design, because it was forgiving in the design. Because the controls were a little loose, you felt like you could get away with a little more. You would still die if you didn't hit certain targets, but like you're hitting a 2-inch wide patch of sand instead of a tiny platform. And if you miss that patch of sand or hit it at the wrong angle, you'll still bounce off or not get through it and not tunnel through. So there is still precision needed, but not in the same way that a typical platformer would. And that's why the stages, at least, rarely led to frustration. It was mostly something that was difficult but fun to engage with.
Right. Another recent indie platformer that I really enjoyed was Anton Blast. That game has a very chaotic feel for its platforming and for its motion, but it's all understandable. And there are a couple of fringe pieces or, I guess, advanced tech that felt completely out of reach, and then there was just some moment where it was just, oh, this makes perfect sense. Why do I keep bouncing? I want to stop bouncing. Well, there's some things that you can't help that, and others where it's like, oh, press down, get yourself out of it. Cool. One of the great platforming frustrations, I think, in terms of muscle memory and everything else, you get a higher jump arc if you bounce off something. This is as fundamental as look behind the waterfall, as you start at the platformer, move to the right, in which to say, this isn't always the case, but it's what you think's going to happen. From there, okay, you get a higher jump arc by bouncing off of something you've jumped on. How, though? Is there timing? Do you have to just push it? Do you hold it? What do you do with that? Finding and getting the rhythm of that can be tricky. Anybody who's played through a lot of 2D Mario games knows this pain, knows this feeling. But fortunately, Anton Blast, they don't tell you immediately, but they do tell you, you just need to hold the jump button down indefinitely while you're bouncing, and you will continue to have maximum bounce height. They very definitively tell you by the end of the game at some of the most challenging puzzle rooms, challenge rooms that are just those kinds of challenges, bounce off of single-use platforms to make your way up there. Just hold the button, just worry about left and right. It gives you a stable point to build on. A lot of this is coming down to the fact that just because the challenge is fun in one game doesn't mean it'll be fun elsewhere in how it's implemented. Anton Blast has that almost Kirby idea of getting through the level is not blazingly difficult, but getting everything and doing your best in the stage will cause problems. There are plenty of platforms and areas that you only get one shot to get to. You have to have forward momentum, and then you have to do the bounce clutch hit on the floating block to then get further bounce in order to go far enough. If you don't, you have to start the level all over again. You don't have a limited number of lives, and it gives you a chance to restart from checkpoints and restart from the beginning of the stage in the menu. And most of these are just towards getting more chips to purchase things, a higher score, or towards some of those hidden collectibles that you don't need to finish the game, but don't you want to 100% it? It's incentive-based. The fact that it is a more punishing challenge or a one-time challenge is consistent throughout the game, and it's its own form of the higher track in a Sonic game.
I'm so glad you brought up Kirby also because, first of all, Kirby is not a side-scrolling platformer. You can fly. Platforming is rarely the point, although it can be. It's a side-scrolling action game as far as I'm concerned. The powers, the combat, killing enemies,
These definitions do cross over and get murky, but you're right, at its core.
Right. But that said, like you brought up, and I don't hear enough people talk about this, Kirby is a precision platformer when you are focused on getting certain things. I think of games like Amazing Mirror, which was sort of a Metroidvania, which is a whole other thing. And some of the DS titles, when you're hunting treasure or looking for certain items for the completionist run, then Kirby becomes a lot more difficult because there are areas that require thinking outside the box, platforming differently, flying to a certain part of the map, hunting around for things that make it more challenging. And that's something that's really fascinating about Mario games, 2D ones especially. I think of Super Mario World. Some stages have multiple paths. Some stages also have a tuned difficulty based on what you're looking for. Getting all the keys, getting all the hidden blocks, unlocking Star Road, playing Star Road, all of that is way harder than actually finishing that game, which you can do in an afternoon. I think of Mario Wonder, which was, as a game, hit or miss for me. Depending on what you're going for is more challenging or less challenging. First of all, there's a lot more stages, and they tell you the difficulty rating of each stage, and so you can opt out of the more challenging levels to do the easier ones and still finish the game. But also, getting the Wonder Seed often transforms the stages into something interesting and more challenging. You can choose to not do that if you don't want to. I think it's the Wonder Flower. The Wonder Seeds are what you get later.
Yes.
The Wonder Flower, rather, is what transforms the stages. And I think that's also really interesting design. My issues with Mario Wonder is not the design. I think it's well designed. It looks gorgeous. I love that you can choose the different characters, have the different badges and abilities. I think for me, it just feels like more of the same, even with the new stuff, because I prefer the 3D games at this point, and nothing's going to beat Super Mario World, which I only replayed last year and still held up in almost every conceivable way. But that said, I do like how Nintendo, for challenge versus frustration, they build in the difficulty into the level design. Sometimes I wish they would also just have a slider to make things easier for younger players. That's a whole other thing. But I do like they are experimental with how they tune that difficulty. But because it's not clear this path's the harder path, it can translate to frustration depending on the age of the player or the experience of the player, which is something I've encountered as well.
Well, a Kirby game where I think this actually plays out pretty well is Kirby's Epic Yarn.
Yes.
Sarah and I played through that 2-player, had a lot of fun with it, and it's a game that, completing the stages is as straightforward as any other Kirby title. Kirby as a series, if I'm not mistaken, was conceived very much as, it was a Game Boy game, first of all, so it's meant to be bite-sized. And it was meant to be something that players of any age could complete, which is why Kirby can fly. It's faster to platform, and you want to finish it faster, you want to get better at it like that. But if it gets too much, you can just float over your problems, whatever. Something like Epic Yarn, it didn't necessarily have a ton of challenge roads or things like that. What it had was ranking based on how much you collected. And if you wanted to collect more, you had to do harder things. And so if you just wanted to get to the end, it didn't look like any kind of you did terribly. It was like, cool, you did it. And then you could get shinier, you did it, if you collect more within it. anyone can complete it, or anyone can finish it. You want to complete it, buckle up. Personally, I actually think that is, without a slider, it doesn't need a slider. It's dynamic difficulty on its own. You assail it how you see fit. Rather than going, I'm going to leave those trophies untaken. I'm going to leave that whatever. You just do it and you go as far as you can go and as much as you can go.
Yeah, I mean, I think that's the needing 100 stars to complete Mario 64 or whatever it is, but you can beat the game with less is one of those things where, or is it 200 stars?
No, there's 120 stars in the castle, but you can beat it with, I think, 70?
Right. And so that allows you to pick and choose the stars that you can get. And so if something is too difficult for you as a player, you have alternative paths. And I think all of these things are valid ways to engage with platforming that can lighten the frustration. I think there's no way around frustrating controls. One of the reasons I wish Psychonauts would get a remaster is because the only thing that holds back that experience from being enjoyable is how poorly it controls. You can micromanage it and find your way around it, and you can learn how to get good at poorly controllable games, but some of it eventually becomes out of your hands. Look, I'm not here to bash Sony. I don't need another remaster of a Last of Us games because those games already play incredibly well and look incredibly good. We should be remaking bad games. This is a thing I've said and other folks have said in many places. Remake Bubsy 3D and make it good.
Remake Superman 64.
Exactly. Like, make these bad games good, right? Like, why wouldn't we do that? Take another stab at this terrible thing and make it better. But I do think that there can be a fine line, especially with level design and platforming specifically, and controls within platforming, because I think controls are going to play into all of these topics. It's a fine line sometimes, because also you cannot predict or assume the skill of the player, right? It's why some 3D and 2D platformers over-tutorialize and others don't tutorialize at all, or you learn by doing.
Now, on the flip side, that you learn by doing, Kaizo games. Trolling platformers, I want to be the guys. I spoke before, and I speak often, of kind of the learned, not necessarily gamer instincts, but the tenets of design, the assumed idea. You start on the left side of a side-scroller, you move to the right, clearly. Game didn't tell you that necessarily. It may signpost it, it may project it, and you may be correct. But sometimes, things usually drop when you go under them. What if you jump over the tree and the apple falls up to hit you? Well, now you've learned something.
Right.
Do all apples fall up or just that apple? Well, now you're going to find out. These sorts of games, these sorts of platforming challenges, their boon is that they are consistently dickish. The apple that falls up and I want to be the guy, it's always that apple. The moon is always going to fall and attack you. Certain things that are hazards are always going to be hazards. In fact, in UFO 50, the very first game that you play, Barbuda, has a moment like that. The title is above you. You move to the right. Part of the title falls and crushes you. And you learn that you have to avoid a panel of it. It's not because you go under it and it kills you instantly. You have to go to the left. You go to the left and there's stuff to explore. And that is a way that it signposts for you. Try over there. It's not just left to right. It is an exploration game. And one that, good luck. And you jump over that and there you go. They can teach you in those ways. And I think of this because one of the other platforming games that I've been playing recently and telling a lot of people about is Level Devil by Unept. A few weeks ago, as of the recording of this episode, it was released on Steam, and that's how I first heard about it and downloaded it and played it. I've described it on Blue Sky and to other people as being treated like Wile E. Coyote by an Atari 2600. Because the graphics are as simple as they need to be. I didn't realize there was music until I was almost done with the game, and I kind of loved the way of single-room challenges with themes around them. So you know that you're dealing with problems with spikes, problems with coins, problems with gravity. These set of levels will control like Flappy Bird. The ways that pits will suddenly open up, the way that spikes will drop on you, the way that physics will suddenly change is consistent, and you can find the trigger. And so you can treat each of these as its own little puzzle or piece of platforming that you then complete. And each of these sets, it's just 5 rooms. Get through them. Have fun. I've completed all of the stages in, I don't know, probably an hour and a half. And the entire time I was having a great time trying to second guess what they were going to do to me. There's plenty of times where, cool, I beat the challenge here. Let me run to the door. Sometimes it would let me. Some rooms, they pulled one last trick on me. I appreciated it every time. It was almost tuned to someone like me, where it's a kind of I'm going to outsmart it. It outsmarted that I was going to outsmart it. If I just did it normally, it'd be fine. Fine, I'll see what the game has to offer. It got me. Damn it. I enjoyed that. There again, I have opened up the Acme box, and I think I've read the instructions, but I haven't. And the part where it gets fun on the other side is you can be methodical about that. There's no time limit. Some of the rooms have kind of a time to challenge to them. But there is also a speedrun mode. And you can hit a timer and basically time attack it. Every time you beat the set of 5 levels, you go back to kind of the pseudo map, pseudo stage select. And, okay, I'm going to do the spike levels now. Okay, I'm going to do the spring levels now. If you're doing speedrun mode, it just goes through the first 5 to the next 5 to the next 5. So you also kind of have to remember what the challenges were if you want to get a good time on it. Again, you still have unlimited lives. It just takes you longer, so you don't get as good of a time. That's okay. You are now running into I've learned all the stages. I'm good at this. But trying to remember them all in order, you've learned all the passages of the song. Now play the symphony is a whole new layer of challenge to it. Much like Celeste and games like it, when you fail, you don't have to go through a cutscene. You don't have to load anything, whatever else. Hit the button. You have a checkpoint within the room. You're good to go again. That removal of friction in precision platformers and masochore platformers and just regular platformers allow for greater connection to the fun. If you've almost got it, damn it, now I have to listen to another minute-long thing or it takes a while, the fun's gone. You want to get into that flow state no matter what kind of platforming challenge or difficulty therein it has.
Yeah, I mean, that's basically what put Super Meat Boy on the map is the fact that it was a masochore platformer that loaded instantly. The minute you died, you were at the beginning of the checkpoint to go again. I think these kinds of platformers bridge the gap to the next area we'll tackle of puzzles because masochore platformers are basically platforming puzzles. There is a more or less correct way to do it. Some have multiple paths. I think of also Foul Damage, which you loved.
Yeah.
Is also training you against a typical platformer instinct is always jump as high as I can.
Yeah.
That way I can reach the highest platform. And you can't do that in that game because if you fall too far, you shatter.
It encourages you to think and to think like the design.
Yeah. I think that is like puzzle within platforming because it becomes not how I do it, but also what are the steps to do it, right? It's not just I need to get from here to there, but then how do I get from here to there? It's not just jumping. It requires other things.
And utilizing the mechanics that the game gives you. The air dashing of Celeste is an excellent example of that. Learning the methods, learning the rhythm, learning it all, much like Psychonauts. The platforming and the precision needs to be a piece of the design. It needs to be taken on and not just presumed and not just read. These superlative and standout platforming experiences that Matt and I have been talking about are ones that were designed platforming first. Mario titles are infamously, it has to be fun to move before you start making anything. You don't always have to have platforming in every game, even if it is a 2D game or an action game or anything else. But when you design it well and you keep that in mind, you can make it as challenging as you want. People will enjoy it.
And so I think we turn it to you, listeners. Do you have favorite level design or platforming games? How do you land with difficulty versus frustration? Do you get easily frustrated playing games? One of the things that kept me away from the Soul series for a long time was quick to irritate, quick to frustrate, even though having years of experience with games like Metroid, which do exactly that. It's all perspective. What are you expecting going into a game? Do you expect it to be a light, breezy experience? Are you expecting a challenge? That kind of a thing as well. But I'm curious to hear from our audience, like what some of their favorite platforming experiences are. And do they think it was the controls, the level design, something else? Like what kept it difficult and interesting and not frustrating? Or was it frustrating? And why? Why do you think the friction was there? What was the friction point?
What was a game that seemed to be much more punishing but was enjoyable for you outside of the norm? What was a game that seemed like it would be a breeze, but some aspect of the experience really soured it for you? What were those intangibles, those pieces that you didn't expect despite the genre Should more games be designed like Bionic Commando and there's no jump button, there is only grappling hook? Who's to say? Is that what you think it needs to be? Let us know. Get in touch with us. There's so many great ways to reach out. We are Fun and Games Pod across all social media that we are active upon, which as of this episode is Blue Sky, Instagram, and Tumblr. You can email us at funandgamespod@gmail.com. Let us know what you thought of this episode, what you thought of previous episodes, what you'd like us to talk about, and who you'd like us to talk with on future episodes. You can also reach us there if you're interested in joining our side quests and talking about a game you love and why you love it. You can visit certainpov.com and find not only other fantastic Certain POV podcasts, but a permanent invite link to our Discord server, where a lot of these conversations continue, and when we complete a lot of these challenging platformers, we talk about it in the Gaming Log channel. If you want a one-stop shop to all the things that Matt and I are working on, or if you have the means and want to financially support us, you can visit our Patreon, patreon.com/funandgamespod. You don't have to give anything. There is a free tier, but you do have to join if you want to participate in any of our polls for future console retrospectives or join our RSS feed for all of our releases. We are so grateful for all of our patrons, and we especially want to shout out those up on the high scoreboard. And today, the high scoreboard is Alex Lavelle, Case Aiken, Daniel Nyden, Alejandro Alves, Chris Copleen, Curly Bright, Film It Yourself, Patrick Edwards, Robert Prine, Sean Bowen, and Wes Bates. Thank you so much for your support. Please enter your initials. You have to jump across the alphabet to get to them. Please do not press the jump button unless you are on the letter you want. There is no double jump. There's no confirm button. You just have to push the button once, okay? Land back on the same letter and then move to the next one. There's no sort of pits or anything like that. If you have to retry, the backspace is all the way at the end of the platform. Again, do not jump until you're on backspace if you want to go backspace, and then end is after that. It's very simple, honestly.
Of course, also, if you have a moment, please rate and review us on your podcast platform of choice. It helps folks find the podcast. While we absolutely appreciate all the support we get via Patreon, this is a free and simple thing that you can do that helps immeasurably. Also, as a bit of housekeeping, it is time for me and Geoff to start promoting our next in-person appearance. We will be at PAX East. It's May this year, and I think hopefully in future years, so there might actually be some decent weather out in Boston. We're going to be there from May 8th to May 11th. It runs that whole weekend, and we're very excited to be there. We'll be covering it as press as we have in the past, talking to developers, bringing you all that juicy and fun indie content that we can. But if you're going to be there, please say hi. We will definitely be at panels and hanging out, unless Geoff at the 0 hour gets asked to be on yet another panel, which at this point is like 2 for 2, so, why not add a third?
But it's the rule of threes. Once you expect it, it's not going to happen. It's going to be Sarah that gets called onto a panel this time. Just you wait.
Yeah, exactly. But please come check us out. Come hang with us. We would love to see you while we're there.
Absolutely. And whether at PAX East 2025, whether across all of these episodes, whether on Patreon, Blue Sky, Discord, or whether this is your first episode of Fun and Games, thank you so much for being here. We couldn't do this without you. This is a conversation. Thank you for being a part of it. I'm Geoff Moonen.
And I am Matt A.K. Stormageddon.
And happy gaming.
Do you feel like you're the only person in your circle who wants to go deep about video games regularly?
We were like that too, until now.
Welcome to Crossplay Conversations, the brand new bi-weekly topical video game podcast from Luke Lewis,
Joseph Hooper,
And Jacob McCord.
with many years of breaking it down separately on shows like the Left Behind Game Club, Player Podcast, and Lukewarm Games, the gang is finally coming together to publish their gaming group chat in audio form every other week.
Expect roundtable reviews of the latest games, profiles of upcoming indies, and insightful conversations about essential topics in the video game industry. All with a mostly positive, insightful, and fun style.
Crossplay Conversations debuts on August 1st with brand new episodes hitting every other Tuesday. Help us out by subscribing on your podcast platform of choice to get the first episodes delivered straight to your feed.
And follow us on Twitter at Crossplay Convos for updates about the show.
Cheers and happy gaming.
CPOV. CertainPOV.com.